Okay. So I will spotlight you for everybody. What I'll say is take a few minutes, maybe let's say 5 minutes or so, to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, why you're running, and then we can do some Q&A.
That sounds great. And it is great to be here with you all in the way that we all gather together these days. So my name is Ben Downing. I'm a Pittsfield native, a former senator from Western Mass, a clean energy business leader, these days a dad to 2 toddler boys, Michaela's husband, and a proud resident of East Boston. I decided to run for governor because I'm tired of watching too many state leaders waste our time. I'm tired of watching a governor with all the popularity and a legislature with all the power refuse to use either to fight for us. Meanwhile, the communities that I grew up in, that I represented, that I live in, they see rents rise and jobs leave. They see trains run off the track and air clog. They see childcare waitlists grow longer and higher education grow further out of reach. They see, I'm running to be your governor because I believe the future of Massachusetts is limitless, but I know that our time is not. And for too long, the political power in this state, Democrats and Republicans, have acted as though we have a surplus of tomorrows. Like you all, I didn't need COVID to show me that wasn't the case. I grew up in Pittsfield, a city that struggled and had to fight for itself. I know what it is to get knocked down. My city got knocked down as I was growing up. GE left and took all the jobs. We were left cleaning up and rebuilding. The message that my generation heard was crystal clear. Study hard and get out. The best days of your hometown are behind you. Unfortunately, I think that sounds familiar to folks from a lot of communities across this state. My family got knocked down too, when my dad and my younger brother, Nate, died suddenly from heart disease less than 10 years apart. They were the center of my world, my role model and my best friend. So I know what it takes to get back up, to grow stronger at the broken places. I know what it feels like to have your community rally around you and hold you up when you don't know if you could stand without them. Loss shaped the kind of person that I am and the leader that I strive to be. It deepened my empathy and it fueled my sense of urgency. It pushed me to run for the Senate. I got into a race with a lot of candidates who had longer resumes than me. I was dismissed, like young people too often are, until I won, and then went on to represent the largest Senate district in the state for 10 years. There I led efforts to increase clean energy production, to fight poverty and hunger, to expand civil rights protections to our transgender neighbors, and more. After 5 terms in the Senate, I kept a promise I made in that first election and term limited myself. I went to work in clean energy. Michaela and I moved to East Boston and started a family. And we realized quickly that the only thing more renewable than solar energy is a toddler's commitment to tire and terrify their parents every single day. Now, East Boston and Pittsfield, the communities that I've called home, are 150 miles apart, different in a million ways, but similar at the core, and similar to so many other communities across this state. Tough, striving, creative, generous places that have had to fight much harder than they should to get resources and attention from Beacon Hill. And that's what brings me here tonight. That's what brings me to this race, because I have lived and seen the difference that leadership makes. I know what it feels like to be an afterthought, to be forgotten, to be written off. I know exactly who suffers when those in power kick the can down the road. So if we're going to get out of this and rebuild from COVID, if we're going to stop wasting time, we need a new sense of urgency from all of our leaders, starting with our governor. For the last 7 years, Charlie Baker has squandered opportunity after opportunity to take on the big challenges facing Massachusetts families. On transportation, on housing, on childcare, on COVID response, on racial justice. He has all the power and he hasn't used it on our behalf. And too often, too many Democrats on Beacon Hill have cheered him on instead of raising their voices for the too many that have gone unheard. It doesn't have to be this way, but it won't change on its own. That's where we come in. We can change politics in Massachusetts. We can knock down the walls that have let our state government become insular and unresponsive. We can demand leadership as good as the people it claims to serve. That starts now. That starts with having a governor who sees, who feels, who understands the daily impact of economic inequality, the urgency of our climate crisis, the consequences of racial injustice, and who's ready to do something about it. You know, I'm sure all of you at one point or another, you've been knocked down, and someone, as they were trying to help you back up, with the best of intentions, they said, you know, time heals all wounds. This seductive idea that if we just sit back and wait, the pain will go away. If only it were that easy. You know, what you know, what I know, what we know is that healing is active, that recovery takes effort, that rebuilding takes fight and resolve beyond anything you knew you had in you. And none of us can do it on our own. I'm not here because I healed from my father and my brother's deaths. I'm here because my family and my community rallied around me and fought for me. And then I went and fought for them, with them by my side and in my heart. That's the energy we need at this moment. That's our charge. We can't sit back and hope that tomorrow will be better than today. We have to go out and build the tomorrow that we want together. I'm running to be your governor because I believe the future of Massachusetts is limitless, but it's damn past time that we stood up and fought for it. Stood up and fought for the Massachusetts we want to live in, stood up and fought for the Massachusetts we know is possible. So if you're up for that fight, if you're tired of the status quo and those who accept it, if you believe like I do in my bones that we are capable of so much better, I invite you to join us, and I am here to earn your trust, and if I'm lucky enough to have it, your support. My name is Ben Downing. I'm running to be your governor. It's our time to build the Massachusetts we all know is possible. I look forward to answering some questions, and if anyone questions how serious I am about this race, I turned down tickets to tonight's game to be with you all, and I am not thinking about it a second time. Although if it turns out to be an epic game, I might get a couple of texts from my cousin who offered them to me, but nowhere I'd rather be. Nowhere I'd rather be.
Awesome. So thank you so much. And the floor is now open for questions. And if you have questions, feel free to either raise your hand and ask them directly, drop them in the chat and I can ask them for you. Whatever works best for you.
I'll ask a question. Hi, Ben.
Hey, Carol.
So it seems like a core principle of your campaign is accountability.
Mm-hmm.
Can you cite one instance that just is sort of top of mind for you where, for example, the legislature has not shown accountability?
Trying to think which one I would put at the highest level.
Yeah,
I think generally, I think generally on transportation, when I showed up in the Senate in 2007, the D'Alessandro report was the Transportation Finance Commission report of its day. And if we all had copies of that report right now and looked at it, it would read eerily similar to our current transportation status quo, right? You know, growing congestion, crumbling infrastructure, both in transit and roads and bridges, and a system that was designed in the 70s and 80s, burdened with debt in the 90s, that has failed us for all of this century, right? That is the status quo. That's what we've been living through. That's 15 years past and has come on since. Governor Patrick presented forward a plan to help fund and address that in the second term of his time in office. I helped try to rally and count votes in the legislature at that time and ran into the brick wall of resistance everywhere. We couldn't get past about 17 votes in the Senate on that front. And that was maddening to me. There were plenty of my colleagues who could cite projects in their district that they knew needed to be funded, but never would and didn't want to take the quote unquote tough vote around taxes to actually fund those critical investments in our public infrastructure. So I think the transportation status quo, while the last 7 years sits with Charlie Baker, the system that we're living with sits with the legislature. That's where the power has been. That's where the missed opportunity's been. That's where the lack of leadership's been.
Thank you. And I see Lisa.
Hi, I had a question about a bill that's coming up for vote. There's going to be a hearing on it in November, and it's to address the use of aversives in the state. The worst being that people who are disabled can have electric shock given to them legally. And for about 20 years, advocates have tried to, have this practice ended, but the legislature, keeps on not passing the bill. So I'm curious what your history on that bill has been, and also what it would be going forward.
So I have supported the bill to ban the practice in the legislature, roll call votes in the Senate. I know in particular in the House, the leader on that was now former Representative John Sybeck, who led on that issue and worked with John and others to try to ban the practice, and would maintain that position both in this campaign, and it would be a position and priority in the administration and that practice.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Lisa. Appreciate it. So I see Ryan with a hand up, but then I also see Marianne, your partner, raising his hand.
Yeah, so let's do Ryan and then let's do Harold.
Yep. So my question echoes a little bit with Carol's. One thing that bothered me a little is you mentioned Charlie Baker having all the power, which really isn't the case when we have supermajorities. And you mentioned the transportation that you think we could have done more from the probably House and Senate side. And this might be the same answer, but what's something you led on to try to take that power away from Charlie Baker, aside from now running for governor? And then my follow-up question to that is, what will you do differently to beat Charlie Baker if he is the one you're running against?
Yeah. So just to be clear on that, Ryan, on the first question, it's where an example of how I tried to take power away from Charlie Baker while he was in office, or just sort of where I opposed a measure that he took, something along those lines, just to be clear. Where
you took a leadership position to show Charlie Baker he doesn't have all the power.
Yeah. So the example I would point to first would be on climate and clean energy. So for 3 of the 5 terms that I was in the Senate, I was chair of the Telecom, Utilities, and Energy Committee. When Governor Baker ran in 2010, he doubted the science on climate. In 2014, while he came to accept the science, he was skeptical of offshore wind, to the point when we were negotiating the climate bill that was ultimately signed into law in 2016. He was skeptical still then of offshore wind. The administration's position was they just wanted a big, no bid contract for Hydro-Quebec to enrich Eversource and National Grid, the key investors in that project. As chair of the Senate Energy Committee, we led and put forward the largest possible, or the largest of any of the branches on offshore wind for procurement. We wanted to increase significantly the renewable portfolio standard and our first energy storage incentives, along with a variety of other what we thought sort of procurement and good government reforms around utility procurement and operation. We're ultimately able to get the largest in the first state to have that offshore wind requirement in place. That's something I fought for and made sure that the Baker administration signed into law. Now Charlie Baker wants to tout it and say it's the best thing since sliced bread. If that's what it takes to get climate action, let's go. But I would much rather us not have to spend our time and energy convincing our governor. I'd much rather have our governor pulling together a broader coalition there. So I think on offshore climate generally, offshore wind in particular, there are other steps where he was trying to get rid of the Mass Clean Energy Center and others that I could reference as well. And I'm sorry, now I talked a little longer. I forgot the second part of the question there.
Oh, it's more generally speaking, what would be different about your strategy running to win this time?
So too often, 2 points, one on messaging, one on communities and sort of geographical coalitions. On messaging, I think it's really important that we, the Democratic message too often in both 14 and 18 seemed to be Charlie Baker's a Republican. You see the Republicans in Washington, they're all bad, so just vote for us. We didn't make a clear enough and affirmative enough message for us as Democrats. And we didn't focus on Charlie Baker's record, right? And that is certainly easier now. There's a longer record over time. But there was a record there even in 14, and it's not enough to just point at the bright, shiny object and say, he's Donald Trump, because as much as we all can see connections there, I think for a broad swath of voters, they look at it and say, well, he's distanced himself from the president enough for me. And then they ignore every other important argument that we want to be able to go out there and make. So I would be focusing on the record in our message, laying out what Governor Baker has failed to do or the negative steps that he's taken while in office, some of the negative appointments he's made and the reactive form of management that he has undertaken. And then laying out a clear agenda as we have with policy plans already on climate, an anti-poverty plan, childcare and transportation with a racial justice action plan, and housing to be following thereon soon after. So running on a clear vision for how we would get out there and do it. And then also, we're going to show up multiple times in communities and have already. If you look at where Charlie Baker grew his support from 10 to 14 and from 14 to 18, he grew in Western Mass and Central Mass and in gateway cities. I grew up in Western Mass. I grew up in a gateway city. I've spent my time working in and around those communities, even though I'm a resident of East Boston now, and we're going to continue to build in those communities to make sure that voters in those communities know that they are heard, that they are seen, and that we see the potential and opportunity in those communities to build a stronger Commonwealth for everyone everywhere.
Thank you.
Sorry, I had myself muted. Harold, I think you had a question before.
First of all, man, thank you very much for such a compelling presentation. I was not aware of you until this moment, so thank you. We all recognize what a beautiful state we live in, and certainly what a fascinating and wonderful city we live in. But there's a deep cloud that overhangs both our state and our city, and that is the cloud of homelessness and opioid as it manifests its worst expression in the so-called opioid mile, Mass Ave and Cass Boulevard. I don't know even fathom what's to do about it, but I think it's one of the most important areas we address as a society who cares about these indigent people. I have no clue, but I hope you do.
So a couple of thoughts there, and I want to start by saying I know that Mayor Janey has rolled out her plan around dealing with the immediate issue at Mass and Cass. I've only been able to take a high level skim of that, and I'm trying to dive in a little bit deeper there. But I think generally the points that you bring up, Harold, are all unfortunately both true of that specific neighborhood, but true of multiple neighborhoods and multiple communities across the state, and have been true for the last 30 and 40 years, a growing homeless population from students straight on up through families and through adults. And we know that the failure to build affordable housing, to build housing generally and affordable housing specifically, has been the number one underlying challenge for making sure that people have a safe and stable position from which to address any other challenges they have, whether those are challenges of mental health, physical health, whether they are addiction issues. All of those are complicated when you don't have a roof over your head. And we haven't made it easy enough to build housing across the state, and we haven't done a good enough job of building deeply affordable housing, and that requires investment from the state level. And when I think about priority investments in a Downing administration, education generally with a specific focus on early education, housing with a specific focus on transitional housing and deeply affordable housing, and housing near transit hubs, and then transportation generally. I think the proposals that we've seen to date that give me the most reason for pause or concern around Mass and Cass and other intersections like it across the state are those that want to rely on our criminal justice system. I think to the extent to which we criminalize homelessness and addiction, we are not solving the problems, and we are only complicating the problems and making it that much tougher to get people access to the services that they need. The state needs to create multiple access points to mental health and addiction and recovery services, both in shelters and outside, to make sure that we're meeting people where they are to get them the services that they need. Finally, on Mass and Cass, I would also point out, this stems from an underlying conflict between Boston and Quincy around the permitting of the new Long Island Bridge and the safety of that bridge. That's a failure of our investment in infrastructure. It's also a failure of the Baker administration to step in and mediate that dispute between the communities so that you can have a clear regional path to solving this problem. It isn't a problem of one neighborhood. It isn't a problem of two communities. It's a statewide problem that stems from our lack of investment in affordable housing and addiction and recovery services at the front end.
Thank you.
Appreciate the points, Harold.
Thank you. Lisa, is that another question?
No, sorry.
Jackie, do you have a question? Okay, so any other questions that folks have? I can throw in one myself. So one thing that you saw recently, there was that the Department of Justice had an investigation into the Department of Corrections here in Massachusetts, noting kind of like systematic abuse of human rights of people kind of currently incarcerated, especially those with mental illness. Here, what are some things that you would want to steps that you would want to take if elected governor to help address that kind of systematic lack of accountability in the Department of Corrections?
Yeah, so and appreciate you bringing this up, Jonathan. I think first you saw there, even when the legislature took the steps of requiring there being an ombudsperson for the Department of Corrections, you saw that the individual that was appointed by the Baker administration had a significantly troubled past, and one that didn't show that the administration took a great deal of seriousness in appointing that position and a great deal of care of thinking who would go into that position. So I think it's critically important that in the next administration, we have an individual appointed there who will speak truth to power in that position first and foremost, that we in the governor's office hear directly from individual inmates and their families. Those voices too often have had to go to the legislature, go to outside advocates to be heard at all. We need to bring in principles of restorative justice, not just to those who are about to re-enter into their community, but throughout the system, because we know that when those principles are implemented, you have a better environment for folks to deal with some of the underlying challenges that have brought them into interaction with the criminal justice system generally. And then on the whole, we need to have far greater investments in reentry, right? So you create a better environment within the Department of Corrections. You hold yourselves accountable by appointing someone who will do so in that ombudsperson role. You open up lines of communication for families and for inmates. And then in reentry, you make the investments in partnerships with both community-based and community-led organizations to make sure that when our neighbors return from serving their sentences, that they are in a supportive environment that's going to allow them to succeed, and the investments that we've made in restorative justice will have the greatest potential impact.
Thank you. Harold, is that another question from you?
Can I just follow through on that question? Is that what really has bothered me amongst many things, but the court reporting where somebody who has been incarcerated has to brand themselves, or is branded as non-desirable in terms of housing and in terms of job opportunities. And thus, it's really almost a life sentence in many cases. I wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, and so a couple of different ideas there. So one, there's a direct connection to a proposal within the anti-poverty plan that we've rolled out. There's a proposal there around a community-based jobs program that is modeled off of the Evergreen Cooperatives in Cleveland. The Evergreen Cooperative proposal in Cleveland, or it's a proposal that's being implemented and rolled out right now, the major foundations and anchor institutions surrounding some of the poorest neighborhoods in Cleveland said, instead of just writing checks to nonprofits, we're going to look at where we spend our dollars outside of the community and start to bring a couple of contracts back to the community. And in particular, they did so around a greenhouse and leafy greens for their cafeterias, and then linen service as well. And they created a company in the highest poverty census tracts neighborhoods in and around Cleveland, and created direct economic opportunities there. Those were companies that were owned in that neighborhood, and they were not just owned by an individual, but they were worker owned. So to try to close the racial wealth and wage gap and create real lasting economic opportunities and start to change the economic trajectory of communities that too often have been left behind and haven't seen the benefits of any economic growth or well-being. And in my anti-poverty plan, we would roll out a pilot program with 20 such of those pilot programs across the state in communities that at least have 3 neighborhoods with the poverty rate that is double the state average. And the scary reality is that we've got at least 60 potential sites where we could do that, but we want to be able to pilot it, learn from it, build from it, and create jobs. And in particular, these would be connected to individuals coming out of corrections facilities, right? So that we are intentionally working to knock down those barriers, and for the state to not just be telling employers this is what you ought to do, but rather modeling it as well. So we can continue to take the steps of banning the box and avoiding what information that employers have access to when someone has served their time, but also the state should be modeling how we can live our values and not just be telling private employers what to do as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And then any other questions that folks have? Going once for questions. Hearing none, I will say thank you so much for joining us this evening. I saw that Alicia dropped some information in the chat for about how to get involved, and so it's benformass.com website. I'm sure there'll be many opportunities for folks to engage in the coming months.
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity. Thanks everyone for the questions. Looking forward to staying in touch.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Stay safe and well. Bye, everyone.
And then I will invite up Chris Johnson, who is our next speaker, who will be talking about question 3 on the ballot.
Hi there. Could you give me ability to share my screen?
Yes, I will make you a co-host.
Awesome. So while he's doing that, I am Kristin Johnson. I'm a volunteer for Yes on 3 and came to this work being a BPS parent and advocating around the budget year after year after year. And at some point, I realized that it was becoming the definition of insanity. I was doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And several years ago, I started examining the governance structure of our school committee. And here we are today with a question on the ballot. So I'm going to share my screen and have a brief presentation, and then I'm happy to answer questions about the campaign. So our campaign, Bostonians for an Elected School Committee, submitted a question in mid-August to City Hall, and this is a non-binding policy referendum. So in other words, no matter how people vote, nothing will happen. We need to then make changes in the City Council and then in the State House. So the question reads, should the current appointed school committee structure be changed to a school committee elected by the residents of Boston? We are here to respectfully ask you all to vote yes and ask your ward to support our question. So these are the groups that are behind this. It's a grassroots coalition that we've been building over 3 years at least. Most notably NAACP Boston branch, lots of education and civil rights groups and neighborhood progressive groups. So we worked on this issue for about 3 years and submitted the ballot question in August. So you may or may not know that Boston is the only municipality in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with an appointed school committee. And that happened in 1991. We'll be going into the history just a bit. So a recent poll that came out just today said that 69% of likely voters support yes on the question. So they support going back to elected school committee, with about 15% no and 15% undecided. So with a non-binding ballot question, you only need to get 10 signers. And so we made it our mission to find 10 of the most meaningful signers in the city. And among the first was Dr. Jean McGuire, pictured here, who was the first Black woman elected to the school committee in 1983. There's a wonderful piece on her in GBH from a couple weeks ago. So if you haven't read it yet, look that piece up. And she's just like a wonderful activist for the issue. Other signers include Reverend Willie Bodrick, who some of you may know, Suleika Soto, who's another parent activist in the city, Carrie Mays is another wonderful youth activist. I can share this deck with John at the end so you can see all these Jean Powers is a parent from Alston. So some of you may or may not know the story of how we got here, but it was in June 1991 that we ended up with an appointed school committee. And many are surprised to hear that date because they think us, you know, elected school committee, they think of Louise Day Hicks. And she left the school committee many years before we changed to an appointed board. So we got here by a 1989 ballot question passed with a razor thin margin, but there was continued pressure to change to an appointed board for a number of reasons. And in 1991, that finally happened. So another little known fact is that in July 1993, so Mayor Flynn had put forth the ballot question in 1989, but as he was leaving office, he asked the people who were running for mayor of Boston to consider restoring an elected school committee sooner rather than later. He said, despite the accomplishments of the appointed board, I feel compelled to acknowledge the loss of the vote for school committee has remained a bone in the throat of many Bostonians. And I just find that completely fascinating. I found this in the city archives, and I think it's a little known fact that he backed off of that. So whenever we talk about these school committees, someone inevitably says, what about the bad old days? So, you know, Louise Day Hicks resisted segregation in the 60s and left the school committee in 1969 to run for city council. And as I mentioned, it wasn't until 1992 that the first appointed board took office. So in between there, some really fascinating things happened in Black voting rights in Boston. So there was organizing around school desegregation, but also to get more people of color onto the Boston School Committee. So Mel King, Ruth Batson, John D. O'Brien, coalitions of civil rights leaders organized, had voting registration drives, until finally, after 2 decades of trying, John D. O'Brien was elected in 1977. He was the first Black elected to the board since 1900. Jean McGuire, as I mentioned, went on to be elected after that. And they went on, so this diverse, and then there was a ballot question that changed from 5 at large to the city council district structure we have now. And that board became even more diverse. And they went on to select the first Black superintendent of BPS, and went on to select the first Black woman superintendent of BPS. And then boom, we were changed to an appointed board. So many Black leaders in Boston, to this day, this is still a pain point in the Black community, that they lost the right to vote for the school committee. So you can see many stories about the school committee diversifying, and then it was gone. So in November '89, the Globe wrote, "It's troubling that as the Black community edges toward political power, the now dominant Irish, in alliance with business interests, would try to break that progress by withdrawing the right to vote for school committee members." So we believe that the time is now to restore our right to vote. We've all seen the disarray in the Boston School Committee. We've had 4 resignations over the past year alone. As I mentioned, voters overwhelmingly support this, and we believe it'll bring accountability back to the district. So what this ballot question actually does, as I mentioned, it's non-binding. So there is a framework of a home rule petition that's been filed in the city council by councilors Arroyo and Mejia. And after we find out what happens with this ballot question, they're going to take that up and bring that for citywide discussion. And we'll kind of see how that lands. So we're asking you to tell your friends and neighbors about Yes on question 3. We're a new campaign. We've only been formulated for a few months. Check out our website for opportunities to volunteer and share and amplify our message and donate on our website. So that's about it. Happy to take questions.
Awesome. And then, yeah, so if people have any questions, I'm gonna remove the spotlight so that you can hear if you have questions. If you have questions, feel free to raise your hand and ask them directly or put your question in the chat.
So,
Margaret.
yeah, so I talked to Christine, I think, on the phone, or I think. I was on the school committee, as people may know. I was appointed. And I definitely do think there needs to be a change. I'm in favor of a hybrid model, as opposed to I am nervous about a totally elected school committee, even though I believe in democracy. You know, I'm worried about it being a stepping stone to run for another office. Not sure that school committees should, I'm sure that school committees should not be a stepping stone to run for another office. So that's what I'm concerned about. I'm also concerned about the school committee members coming from being district representatives, because I'm afraid you'd never be able to close a school in that district. So that's also one of my concerns, though, as I heard Christine say, you know, this is a non-binding referendum where it's unclear, you know, it's left to after to define what it's really going to be like. So, but I would hate to have a school committee where everybody's elected from a district. You would never be able to close a school in anybody's district because that person would feel obliged to their district. And I think people should feel responsible for every child in the district, not for the children in their district. So that's my concern, but I definitely feel that it needs to be a change. When I was on the school committee, there were a couple of us who did not feel obligated to the mayor, a couple. But that's all. Everybody else was obligated to the mayor, and the mayor was in charge of the schools, even though the school committee was supposedly independent. And that's been true, I think, since the school committee's appointed, certainly from Menino time through Walsh time. I was the last Menino appointment. So I served under both Menino and Walsh. So and so there needs to be a change. Let me just say one other thing. We still have an appointed school committee, and there are 2 slots open as of November 3rd. People should apply. You have to apply by November 5th. And there are 2 slots open in January. So there are 4 slots open in the school committee. No matter what we're going to do about the school committee, we have 4 out of 7 seats that are up. And you have to apply to get appointed. And the dates for application are November 5th and November 24th. For the first 2 seats, November 5th, and for the second 2 seats in January, November 24th. So maybe, Jonathan, we can send those dates out to people, because I really urge people to apply. You can't get appointed unless you apply.
Is it just on like the BPS website for like a link with information about applying? Because I can find that.
On the citizen nominating panel. I'll send the link to you.
John, is it okay if I just respond to a couple things?
Yeah.
So first, I wanted to say I didn't know you were in here. I did all of this work on the history of the school committee. I was a college dropout. I was a 47-year-old college dropout. I went back to Lesley University, and I just kept on pitching these projects to my advisors. Could I do a history of the school committee? Could I do a history of desegregation? Could I? And they were really, really, really supportive, and I got my degree. So
I love the work you did. It's the first time I've seen it, which is great.
I have lots more. I could show you other stuff offline, but Lesley was so supportive in all this work. And
I'm just trying to say, but correct that you have so much more, and it's fascinating. And if people are interested, she did a lot of amazing work. So I'm just chiming in support of that.
Awesome.
You ought to have a link to that somewhere that people can see it, because I didn't know that stuff. And I think
Awesome.
people do not know that about the power of the Black community just when then we went to an appointed school committee. I don't think people are aware of that.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Should have been.
Yeah, I'd love to connect offline with you. And then I will, as a member of this campaign, just push back gently on, we think it's kind of a positive that there will be a smaller entry point into politics that's a lower dollar value. So as you guys know, it costs hundreds of thousands to run for city council. So we don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. And as we see now, this race with Mary Tamer and then John Barros ran, it hasn't necessarily stopped people from using it as a springboard. And the other, I hear you on the at-large versus district. There's been a lot of recent lawsuits about at-large boards. Lowell lost theirs, Worcester might lose theirs. So there is going to be a robust city discussion that we want everyone to be a part of to see how we land on this. So, and then again with if we have depending on who the mayor is, they will have an influence in what happens. I think Michelle Wu supports majority elected with some appointed.
Yeah.
So thanks.
Great. Any other questions that folks have?
Because we need our Bostonians to be able to.
If can you mute whoever's watching the debate? Any other questions that folks have?
I'd like to make a comment if I could.
Go ahead.
My name is David King, and in 1970, I was living in Hartford, Connecticut, and I ran for a position on the Hartford Board of Education, 9-person board, nonpartisan election, and served for a four-year term, which I did. The interesting part of it was that we had some extraordinary powers. For instance, during my term of first term of 4 years, superintendent of schools resigned, and so we were to choose another one. I was vice chairman of the board at that time, and the chairman appointed me to head a committee to find a new superintendent of schools for the city. So we set up a structure to do that with professional organizations that helped us, and the normal way we came down to four. We went national, came down to 4 candidates, and had them come to the city to be interviewed. But the committee made the decision itself as to who was going to be the superintendent of schools. Nothing to do with the mayor, nothing to do with the city council. I was also chairman of the budget committee for 3 of the 4 years I served. And we submitted our budget to the city to be reviewed like anybody else. One of the most interesting things to me, I was at that point a single man. There were no parents of school children on the committee during the 4 years that I served. It was a good mixture of Black people, Hispanic people, Jewish people, Roman Catholic people from different sections of the city, but no parents at all, which I quite understood. Then I might add that I moved to Boston in 1981, and I ran for the school committee here, soundly beaten, running for a district seat, and was running against an undertaker from South Boston who was running for re-election. very much in favor of an elected school committee. Not afraid of the business about whether or not they would go on and do something else, run for some other office. After I left the committee, the woman who was the chairman did run for the city council in Hartford. But that was unusual. We had almost no instance school committee members running for office. Thanks a lot for letting me tell my story.
That's fascinating, Mr. King. Thank you for sharing that. I think we would find a lot of parents eager to run and in Boston when and if this passes, hopefully.
Lisa.
I was thinking about the issue of the possibility of schools being closed, and I actually think that elected school committee would be great in regards to school buildings, because the school building situation in Boston is so terrible, and schools are closed too often. I think that there's a problem with them closing too much, not too little. So I would love to have that switched. And also about district versus citywide, I think about how kids within the city, they go to so many neighborhoods from, like they start one place and they go to another neighborhood to go to school. So whoever, would serve would have that thing of like, no matter what area they were covering, so many families would go to different locations anyway. So I think people would be forced to think citywide to a certain extent and not just one little area. So those are just my thoughts.
I just wanted to add also that Lisa Jean is also co-author of our logo. She helped me design it.
And then any other questions that people have?
I just wanted to add one thing, if I could, is that in theory, the school committee also appoints the superintendent. In theory, in Boston.
Marie, I see your hand up.
I think I unmuted myself. This is kind of a third rail issue, I know, and I get put down every time I bring it up, but I really think that somehow we have to move back toward neighborhood schools. And I know the idea of choice and people should be able to choose the best school. We just should have good schools everywhere. I do volunteer at the Blackstone, and the kids are coming from all over the place. And you try to have parent meetings, and these poor people are coming from just everywhere after their long day at work. It's just, it doesn't foster community for the kids or the parents, and parents don't meet each other. And I know this is a long-term goal, and we need to have magnet schools and specialty schools, but it just seems that it ought to be there somehow in the mix and of the goal. Maybe that would help us to rectify some of the horrible buildings that we have in our school, in our thing too. I'm very much for an elected committee, and I think probably a hybrid, with a couple appointed people and the terms should overlap so the school committee doesn't change all at once. But I think our goal should be community schools with some specialty schools built in. Thanks.
I agree.
And then any other questions, comments on this topic from folks? Just out of a question of curiosity, Chris, what's it look like if there's a home rule petition that then has to go from the legislature? What support has there been so far from the Boston delegation?
Well, that's a great question. We are trying to do really well on this ballot question, obviously non-binding, but we've been advised from Councilor Arroyo and others to do as well as we possibly can to prove to the Boston delegation and, you know, to all of the state house that the political will is there to get it done and get it done quickly. So, you know, in Chicago, we've seen it's been taken 15 years for their activists to get back to elected school committee, which I'm like, my kids will be 30 years old by then if that happens. So, you know, we haven't even really approached the Boston delegation yet. Our goal is to just hit it out of the park with this ballot question, and along with the legislation in the city council, just to prove we have the will to get it done.
Great, thank you. And then any other questions for Chris?
I just had a quick one for the communities, for every other community in Massachusetts that is elected. Are they hybrids or are they all fully elected?
As far as I know, they're all fully elected. So there's just, yeah, the Mass Association of School Committees there is excited about this prospect because the way Boston operates a little differently makes it a little challenging for them as a whole.
Oh, this is a quick question from the Massachusetts Association of School Committees perspective. Is there kind of a sense, at least within like school committee universe in Massachusetts, that a shift to an elected school committee in Boston would actually like lead to the Boston school committee members playing a more active role in the Massachusetts Association of School Committees than the current appointed ones, since a lot of appointees, as Margaret noted before, view themselves as like largely like serving the role of like doing the mayor's work.
Yeah, I only know from my experience of one contact there, but they are optimistic about this prospect to have Boston have Democratic partners in the work. So,
let me say, the Association of School Committees, no, doesn't have a lot of power. As an association, it's a trade association, right? And it serves to orient new school committee members. It's its primary purpose, really. And it does not, because it's from all over the state, does not have political clout because it's so diverse. And so it can't, because it represents so many different viewpoints. And its main purpose is to, when you're a new school committee member, is to figure out what your job is. So I don't think whether or not we were elected or appointed would make much difference.
Okay. And then any other questions for Chris? Going once and going twice. Hearing David, is that another question or? Okay. Hearing none. Thank you so much for joining us. Folks, can give her a round of applause.
anyone can reach out to me. John has my contact information.
Yes, I'll send that out. And then if you could send me the slideshow, I'm happy to share that with folks as well.
For sure. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Thanks for all your work.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, and I know that our next speaker is not going to actually be here until 7:30. Should I say